My husband told me not to come to his parents' house for Christmas. My ex-wife will be there, he said. My parents want my daughter to have one complete Christmas. So I spent Christmas Eve my own way. But just after midnight my phone rang. My husband's voice was trembling. Why did you do this to me? People like to believe marriages end with one explosive fight, one affair, or one dramatic betrayal. Mine didn't. Mine ended with a sentence spoken so casually that if someone else had overheard it, they probably wouldn't have thought much of it. My ex-wife will be there, Daniel said while adjusting the knot of his dark green Christmas tie in our bedroom mirror. Mom and Dad want Lily to have one complete Christmas with both her parents. He paused just long enough to glance at my reflection. I think it's better if you skip this one. Skip this one. Not we'll celebrate together tomorrow. Not I'm sorry. Not even I know this hurts. Just skip this one. For a second, I honestly thought I had misunderstood him. You mean, you want me to stay home? I asked quietly. He sighed, already sounding tired of the conversation before it had truly begun. It isn't what I want. Those words always came before something he absolutely wanted. It's just easier. Easier for who? For everyone. Everyone. Apparently, I wasn't included in that word anymore. I stood beside the bed, folding one of the sweaters I'd bought during a Black Friday sale only a month earlier. It was one of those simple cream-colored cable knit sweaters that somehow made every Christmas movie look believable. I'd imagined wearing it to his parents' house while helping his mother finish dinner, watching Lily open presents, and drinking too much hot chocolate afterward. Instead, I carefully folded it again and placed it back into the drawer. I understand, I said. Daniel looked genuinely surprised. No argument? I almost laughed. After 4 years of marriage, he still thought silence meant defeat. No, he smiled with visible relief. I appreciate that. He walked over and kissed my forehead. It felt less like affection than gratitude from someone whose problem had conveniently solved itself. I won't be too late. I nodded. Neither of us believed that. Downstairs, dozens of wrapped presents were stacked neatly beside the front door. Every gift tag had been written in my handwriting. Daniel's father loved old Western novels. His mother collected handmade Christmas ornaments. Lily had begged for a telescope after learning about constellations at school. Even Daniel's ex-wife, Megan, had a small gift from me. A scented candle and gourmet coffee beans. We weren't friends, but we'd always managed to be respectful toward each other. She had never given me a reason not to be. Ironically, the only person who had truly excluded me from Christmas wasn't the ex-wife. It was my husband. Daniel loaded everything into the SUV while I held the front door open. Before getting inside, he hesitated. You sure you're okay? The question came too late to matter. I'm fine. He nodded once, climbed behind the wheel, and drove away. I stood on the porch until his taillights disappeared around the corner. The neighborhood looked exactly like every Christmas postcard Americans love to send each other. Fresh snow dusted the sidewalks. Inflatable Santas leaned slightly in the front yards. Children dragged sleds across frozen lawns while parents carried casserole dishes between neighboring houses. Somewhere down the street, a choir was singing Silent Night. Everything looked warm. Everything looked complete. Except my house. When I stepped back inside, the silence settled around me almost immediately. The Christmas tree still glowed in the living room, reflecting softly against the front windows. The stockings I'd hung above the fireplace remained perfectly straight. Mine. Daniel's. Lily's. For the first time since we'd been married, I realized mine looked like it belonged to a guest. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee even though it was already evening. The mug had tiny snowflakes painted around the rim. Daniel had bought it for me during our first Christmas together. Back then, he'd held my hand across the kitchen island and whispered, I've never felt this peaceful with anyone. Funny how memories age. Sometimes they become warmer. Sometimes they become evidence. I carried my coffee upstairs instead of sitting in the living room. Inside my home office sat a slim navy blue folder. It hadn't been there by accident. 3 weeks earlier, after another strange conversation with Daniel about keeping finances simple, I'd made an appointment with an attorney. Not because I wanted a divorce. Because I wanted answers. The attorney hadn't tried to scare me. She hadn't encouraged me to leave. She'd simply listened. Then she'd said something I couldn't stop thinking about. Hope for the best, she'd told me. Prepare for the truth. Those 6 words had followed me every day since. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of financial statements, legal notes, and a checklist written in my own handwriting. Open individual checking account. Done. Redirect paycheck. Done. Inventory personal property. Done. Photograph valuables. Done. Gather tax records. Done. Meet with financial advisor. Done. I hadn't hidden money. I hadn't broken any laws. Everything had been done exactly the way my attorney instructed. Because preparation isn't revenge. Preparation is survival. Still, I stared at the final unchecked line. File only if necessary. I closed the folder. I really hoped, I whispered into the empty room, that I'd never need you. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Lily. "Merry Christmas," she said excitedly the moment I answered. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I love the telescope." "I'm glad. Dad said you weren't feeling well." I closed my eyes. There it was. The lie. Small. Convenient. Completely unnecessary. "I'm actually okay," I said carefully. "I just couldn't make it tonight." "Oh," she sounded confused. "I wish you were here." "So do I." We talked for another 5 minutes about school, astronomy, and the family dog she'd convinced Daniel to let her adopt 2 years earlier. Before hanging up, she said quietly, "I saved you a cookie." My throat tightened. "Thank you." When the call ended, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt. Because crying wouldn't change anything. Instead, I picked up my overnight bag. Earlier that afternoon, I'd checked into a small boutique hotel overlooking Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, about an hour from home. It wasn't extravagant, but it was peaceful, and for the first time in months, I wanted to spend one evening somewhere no one expected me to smile through disappointment. The lobby smelled like pine branches and cinnamon. A pianist was playing Christmas standards near the fireplace. Couples laughed softly over glasses of wine while children searched for candy canes hidden around the lobby by the staff. No one knew me. No one pitied me. That anonymity felt strangely comforting. After checking into my room, I changed into comfortable clothes, ordered room service, and stepped onto the small balcony overlooking the frozen lake. Snow drifted lazily beneath the streetlights. Everything was quiet, peaceful, almost healing. Just before midnight, I turned off every notification on my phone except emergency calls. Then I leaned back in the chair and watched the snow fall. At exactly 12:14 a.m., my phone lit up. "Daniel," I answered. Before I could say hello, I heard him breathing hard. His voice was shaking so violently I barely recognized it. "What?" he gasped. "What did you do to me?" For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear Daniel breathing into the phone, fast and uneven, as though he'd run a mile through the freezing December air. Somewhere behind him, a car door slammed, and another vehicle pulled away across wet pavement. He wasn't at the house anymore. He was outside. "What are you talking about?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." "No, Daniel, I don't." "My clothes." He stopped, swallowed hard, then started again. "The divorce papers, the bank. My God, what the hell have you done?" I looked across the frozen lake. Snowflakes drifted through the yellow glow of the hotel lights, and somewhere below, a family laughed while taking pictures beside a decorated evergreen tree. I closed my eyes. "It sounds like you should call your attorney," I said quietly. Then I ended the call. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't smiling. I simply placed the phone face down on the small patio table and sat there for another minute, listening to the wind moving across the ice. People imagine revenge feels exciting. It doesn't. Not when it's built from months of disappointment. Not when every step you took was one you prayed you'd never have to use. As I watched the snowfall, my mind drifted back 3 weeks. To the afternoon, everything had finally begun making sense. It was a Thursday. Nothing remarkable about it. I left work early because my office closed ahead of Thanksgiving weekend. Daniel had texted me that morning saying he'd be working late, so I picked up groceries, stopped for gas, and drove home expecting to spend a quiet evening wrapping Christmas presents. Instead, I found our mailbox overflowing. Most of it was junk mail, but one envelope caught my attention. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Daniel. The return address belonged to a law office. I didn't open it. I simply placed it on the kitchen counter. When Daniel came home after 8, he walked past me without his usual hello, saw the envelope, and froze. For just a fraction of a second. Then he picked it up. Oh. His smile appeared almost instantly. That's just something from work. A law office? For work. He didn't know that my father had practiced real estate law for nearly 30 years before retiring. I recognized legal stationery almost instinctively. Still, I let it go. Or at least I pretended to. The next morning after Daniel left for work, I made an appointment with an attorney of my own. Not because I believed he was filing for divorce. Because something inside me whispered that I needed to understand my rights before I needed to defend them. Her office wasn't intimidating. No towering bookshelves. No dramatic courtroom photographs. Just a warm receptionist, fresh coffee, and a woman named Karen who looked more like a trusted school principal than a divorce attorney. She listened without interrupting while I explained everything. Daniel's distance. His secretive phone calls. The unexplained financial changes. The envelope. When I finally stopped talking, Karen folded her hands together. I hope you're wrong, she said. So do I. But hope isn't a legal strategy. That sentence stayed with me. She spent nearly 2 hours explaining things I'd never imagined needing to know. Separate property. Marital property. Joint accounts. Retirement funds. Credit exposure. Temporary financial protections. She didn't tell me to file. She didn't tell me to investigate my husband. She simply told me to prepare. If everything works out, she said, smiling gently, you'll have wasted a little time. And if it doesn't? You'll thank yourself. I walked out carrying a navy blue folder that suddenly felt much heavier than paper should. Over the next week, I quietly followed every recommendation. I opened an individual checking account. Perfectly legal. I redirected my paycheck there. Perfectly legal. I downloaded copies of our joint financial statements. Perfectly legal. I photographed expensive furniture, jewelry, electronics, and family heirlooms. Perfectly legal. None of it was revenge. It was documentation. The following Friday, something else happened. I came home unexpectedly because our office holiday luncheon had ended early. Daniel didn't hear my car pull into the driveway. When I opened the front door, I heard his voice from the study. After Christmas. Silence. No, she'll never see it coming. Another pause. I've already talked to my lawyer. I stood completely still. He laughed. I just need to get through the holidays. Every instinct told me to walk into that room. To confront him. To demand an explanation. Instead, I quietly stepped back outside, closed the front door without making a sound, got into my car, and drove around the neighborhood for 20 minutes before returning home. By then, he was in the kitchen making coffee. He smiled as though nothing had happened. You're home early. So are you. My meeting got canceled. Another lie. That evening, I cried for exactly 15 minutes. Then I washed my face. The next morning, I called Karen again. This time, she didn't look surprised. I think he's preparing to file after Christmas, I said. Then let's make sure you're prepared too. The weeks that followed became the strangest of my marriage. Daniel grew friendlier. Almost cheerful. He suggested we decorate cookies together. He asked me to help choose presents. He even kissed me goodbye every morning. Looking back, I realized why. He wasn't rebuilding our marriage. He was trying to make it peacefully through the holidays before ending it on his own timetable. He believed he was directing the story. He had no idea I'd already started reading ahead. Then came another unexpected moment. One Saturday afternoon, I stopped by Daniel's parents' house to drop off homemade pumpkin bread while he was helping Lily with a school event. His mother answered the door with genuine surprise. "Oh, we weren't expecting you." "I was just in the neighborhood." She thanked me warmly, invited me inside for coffee, and we chatted for almost half an hour. During the conversation, she said something that made my stomach drop. "We're so glad you're finally feeling more comfortable with keeping holidays smaller." I frowned. "I'm sorry?" She smiled. "Daniel said big family gatherings make you anxious now." I stared at her. "I never said that." Her smile slowly disappeared. "I assumed." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Daniel had been rewriting our marriage for other people long before he planned to end it. Suddenly everything fit together. Why invitations seemed less enthusiastic. Why his parents rarely called me directly anymore. Why people had started treating me like someone choosing to stay distant. He'd built that image one small lie at a time. When I drove home, I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. Crystal clear. That evening I called Karen again. "I've made my decision." She didn't ask why. Instead, she asked one simple question. "Are you making this decision because you're hurt?" She paused. Or because you're ready?" I looked around the quiet living room Daniel and I had built together. The Christmas tree. The stockings. The framed wedding photo. The life I'd spent 4 years protecting. "I'm ready." Karen nodded. "Then from this point forward, we don't act emotionally." "What do we do?" "We act carefully." For the next 2 weeks, everything happened exactly as the law allowed and exactly as my attorney recommended. No screaming. No hidden money. No destruction. No games. Just preparation. Then, 3 days before Christmas, Daniel looked up from his phone and casually said the words that finally confirmed there was nothing left to save. "My ex-wife will be there. My parents want Lily to have one complete Christmas." In that moment, he unknowingly activated the final step of a plan he believed only he had been making. When people hear the word revenge, they usually imagine screaming matches, shattered dishes, slashed tires, or dramatic confrontations in front of a crowd. None of that happened. The most devastating thing I did that Christmas Eve was remain exactly as calm as the attorney had advised me to be. Karen had repeated the same sentence in every meeting. Never let anger make a decision that the law should make. By Christmas morning, nearly everything had already been prepared. Nothing had been rushed. Nothing had been done behind Daniel's back that violated the law. Every document had been reviewed twice. Every financial move had been approved before it happened. The only thing left was timing. And Daniel, without realizing it, chose the timing himself. Christmas Eve arrived bright and bitterly cold. Sunlight reflected off fresh snow, making the neighborhood sparkle as though every rooftop had been dusted with powdered sugar. I woke before sunrise, made coffee, and sat alone in the living room watching the lights on the Christmas tree blink softly. 4 years. That was all it took for an ordinary suburban house to become filled with memories. Our first Christmas as husband and wife. The year Lily insisted the angel belonged crooked because she's flying. The Christmas Daniel burned the cinnamon rolls and convinced everyone they were supposed to look that way. There had been real happiness. That's what made the ending hurt. If our marriage had been miserable from the beginning, leaving would have been easy. Instead, I was grieving the man Daniel used to be, or perhaps the man I believed he was. At 9 that morning, Karen called. "How are you holding up?" "I've been better." I wasn't asking emotionally. That almost made me laugh. "I've signed everything." "Good." "You've reviewed the settlement?" 3 times. "And the financial documents?" "Done?" She paused. "Then today's job is simple. Go to the hotel." "Exactly." No last-minute conversations. No arguments. No texts. No social media. No surprises. I looked around the quiet house. What if he calls? He probably will. What do I say? Karen answered without hesitation. The truth. Around noon, Daniel came downstairs carrying wrapped gifts. He looked almost cheerful. "You really don't mind?" The question caught me off guard. I thought we'd already talked about it. I know. He shifted awkwardly. I just wanted to make sure. I studied his face. Was there guilt? Maybe. But not enough to change his decision. I'm fine, I said. He smiled. I appreciate how understanding you've been. Understanding. Funny choice of words. Understanding would have meant he believed I deserved honesty. Instead, he'd spent weeks building a future that didn't include me. I helped him carry presents to the SUV. Every gift had been chosen by me. His mother's handmade quilt. His father's favorite bourbon. Lily's telescope. Even the stocking stuffers. Daniel loaded everything into the back. Before climbing into the driver's seat, he kissed my forehead. I'll see you tonight. I simply nodded. He drove away believing he was leaving his wife home alone. He had no idea he was actually driving away from our marriage. An hour later, I locked the front door for what I suspected would be the last time as Daniel's wife. The moving company arrived exactly on schedule. Karen had arranged everything through a licensed company experienced in divorce transitions. There were no dramatic scenes. No furniture disappearing. No empty house. Only Daniel's personal belongings. His clothes. His golf clubs. His books. His framed college diploma. The leather chair he had inherited from his grandfather. Each box had been carefully labeled. Nothing damaged. Nothing missing. The foreman reviewed the inventory with me. I'll need your signature here. I signed. The delivery instructions? I handed him the paperwork. Daniel had already told everyone he would be spending the night at his parents' house because Christmas celebrations usually ran late. Karen suggested that rather than leave his belongings piled in our garage or on the porch, they be delivered there the following morning after the holiday, once legal notice had been served. His parents had been notified in advance by the law office that a delivery connected to the separation would arrive, without disclosing unnecessary details. It wasn't meant to embarrass him. It was meant to prevent conflict. The foreman smiled politely. We'll take good care of everything. I know you will. As the truck pulled away, I stood in the driveway for several moments. The house looked exactly the same. No neighbors stared. No one whispered. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. Before leaving for the hotel, I walked through every room one final time. The kitchen where we danced while making pancakes. The family room where Lily had built blanket forts. The spare bedroom we once talked about turning into a nursery. That dream had quietly disappeared long before Christmas. In our bedroom, I removed my wedding ring. I didn't throw it. I placed it carefully inside a small velvet box. Beside it sat the divorce papers. On top of the folder, Karen had suggested leaving only one handwritten note. Not emotional. Not cruel. Just clear. I had rewritten it at least 20 times before settling on 3 simple sentences. Daniel, you were already planning to end our marriage. I simply refused to let you decide when my future would begin. That was all. No accusations. No insults. No mention of Megan. No mention of Christmas. Because those things weren't the reason our marriage ended. Dishonesty was. By late afternoon, I had checked into the Lakeside Hotel. The receptionist greeted me with a warm smile. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Traveling alone? Yes. She hesitated only briefly before sliding my room key across the counter. I hope you find some peace here. I think I already have. She didn't ask another question. I appreciated that. Sometimes kindness is knowing when not to be curious. That evening I ordered a simple dinner. Roasted chicken. Mashed potatoes. Apple pie. Nothing fancy. As I ate near the window overlooking the frozen lake, Christmas music drifted softly through the hallway. Families passed my room laughing. Children argued over board games. Someone knocked on the wrong door by mistake and apologized through embarrassed laughter. Life continued. Mine would too. Around 7 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was Lily. I wanted to tell you thank you again for my telescope. You're welcome, sweetheart. I can see Jupiter. I knew you would. She giggled. Dad needed the instructions. I suspected he might. For several minutes, we talked about planets and school. Then, almost absent-mindedly, she asked, "Why didn't you come?" I chose every word carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make difficult decisions. There was a long pause. Then she said something that stayed with me forever. "I think Christmas is supposed to be for everybody." I swallowed hard. "I think you're right." Meanwhile, more than an hour away, Christmas dinner had not gone the way Daniel expected. I didn't learn every detail until much later, but between Daniel's own admission, his parents' apologies, and even Megan's account during the divorce proceedings, I eventually understood what had happened. Dinner began normally enough. Turkey, ham, candles, presents, Lily showing everyone her telescope. Then Daniel's mother looked around the table and quietly asked, "I wish your wife could have been here." Daniel forced a smile. She preferred a quiet evening. Before anyone else could respond, Lily frowned. "She told me she wanted to come." The room fell silent. Daniel's father looked up from his plate. "What do you mean?" "You said she was sick," Megan added, confused. "I'm not sure that's what happened." Daniel suddenly found himself trying to explain two different stories at the same table. Then Megan set down her fork. She looked directly at him. "You asked your wife to spend Christmas Eve alone?" No one spoke. Even Lily seemed to understand something important had just happened. The warmth around the dinner table disappeared. Not because of me. Because truth had quietly walked into the room. Daniel didn't know it yet. But by the time he drove home that night, every story he'd carefully told over the previous months had already begun to unravel. The roads were nearly empty when Daniel left his parents' house. It was just after midnight, and a light snowfall had begun again, soft enough that the flakes seemed to float rather than fall. Christmas lights glowed from quiet neighborhoods as he drove home, but the holiday warmth he'd expected to carry with him had disappeared hours earlier. The silence at his parents' dinner table had followed him all the way to his car. According to Daniel himself, he replayed the evening over and over during that drive. Lily asking why I wasn't there. Megan looking at him with disappointment instead of sympathy. His father setting down his fork without saying a word. His mother quietly whispering, "Daniel, did you really ask your wife to stay home?" For the first time, he realized no one had congratulated him for keeping the peace. Instead, they had all begun questioning him. Even Megan had pulled him aside while everyone else cleaned the kitchen. "I agreed to come because I thought everyone was comfortable with it," she'd said. "If I'd known you were leaving your wife home alone on Christmas Eve, I would have suggested something different." He'd tried defending himself. "You don't understand." "No," she'd answered calmly. "I understand perfectly. I spent 10 years married to you." That sentence stayed with him. It echoed through his head as he pulled into our driveway. The porch light was still on. Everything looked normal. Almost too normal. He unlocked the front door and stepped inside. "Claire?" His voice carried through the quiet house. No answer. He tried again. "Claire?" Still nothing. The Christmas tree was glowing softly in the living room, just as we'd left it. The stockings still hung over the fireplace. Mine. His. Lily's. Nothing looked broken. Nothing had been destroyed. There wasn't a single sign of anger. That unsettled him more than any argument could have. Then he saw the dining table. A single folder rested neatly in the center. Beside it sat my wedding ring. His heartbeat quickened. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and opened the folder. On top was my handwritten note. He read it once. Then again. His hands began to shake. Underneath were the divorce papers. Attached was a letter from Karen's law office confirming that the petition had already been filed earlier that afternoon, and that future communication regarding the legal proceedings should be directed through counsel whenever appropriate. Daniel stared at the date. Christmas Eve. She filed today. He whispered the words aloud as though saying them might somehow change them. No. He turned and ran upstairs. Our bedroom closet stopped him cold. My side looked almost exactly as it always had. His side was nearly empty, not stripped. Not ransacked, simply organized. The clothes I had packed for him were gone because the movers had already collected them. Only a few items that Karen advised should remain until the inventory process was complete were still hanging neatly in place. His dresser drawers were mostly empty. The leather travel bag he used for business trips was gone. His golf clubs, his winter boots. Everything had been documented. Everything had been inventoried. Nothing had disappeared unlawfully. Nothing had been vandalized. It looked less like a crime scene, and more like someone had professionally concluded a chapter. He hurried downstairs again, grabbed his phone, and logged into the banking app. The screen displayed a notification. Joint account. Temporary transaction restrictions in place pending updated authorization, as previously requested through legal counsel. He tried again. Same message. Karen had explained this process to me more than once. Because a divorce petition had been filed and formal notice issued, certain large transactions involving the joint account now required both parties' consent under the bank's procedures. Neither of us could quietly empty it while the legal process moved forward. It protected both of us. Daniel didn't see protection. He saw that he no longer controlled the timeline. His breathing became shallow. He called his attorney. Voicemail. Of course. It was 12:10 on Christmas morning. Then he called me. When my phone lit up on the balcony, I already knew who it would be. I looked at his name for several seconds before answering. Claire. He sounded nothing like the confident man who had kissed my forehead 12 hours earlier. What did you do to me? The question wasn't angry. It was frightened. I wrapped my coat a little tighter against the cold. What happened? My clothes are gone. I know. The divorce papers. I know. The bank account. I know. His breathing grew heavier. Why? I looked across the frozen lake before answering. That's the wrong question. What? The question isn't why I prepared. It's why you thought I wouldn't. Silence. Then came the words I'd expected all evening. I was going to explain everything. When? I don't know. After Christmas? He didn't answer. Because we both knew that was exactly what he'd planned. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I almost smiled. No? No. You told your wife she couldn't spend Christmas with her own husband. I was thinking about Lily. You were thinking about yourself. Another silence. Longer this time. Finally, he spoke again. My parents know. I imagine they do. Megan knows. I imagine she does too. My father won't even answer my calls. I leaned against the balcony railing. Daniel, none of that happened because of me. It happened because you filed. No. I spoke gently but with absolute certainty. It happened because you spent months lying to everyone around you. He didn't interrupt. You told your parents I didn't like family holidays. Silence. You told Lily I was sick. Silence. You told me this wasn't what you wanted. Silence again. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, When did you know? I answered honestly. I suspected after the letter from the law office. He inhaled sharply. You saw it? I saw the envelope. I never meant for you to... I heard you too. Another long pause. The phone call, he finally said. I closed my eyes. Yes. His voice cracked. So, you've known for weeks. I hoped I was wrong. You should have talked to me. I let those words hang between us. Then I asked quietly, Would you have told me the truth? He didn't answer. Because we both knew. He wouldn't have. A cold wind swept across the lake. Below me, a hotel employee finished placing lanterns along the frozen walking path. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang once, announcing Christmas Day. Daniel spoke again. I've lost everything. No. I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. You lost the marriage long before tonight. I never wanted this. Then why were you planning a divorce? He broke down. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just the exhausted sound of a man whose own choices had finally caught up with him. I thought... His voice disappeared. What? I thought you'd always be there." That sentence hurt more than every lie he'd told, because it explained all of them. He hadn't believed I would leave. He believed I would endure, no matter how little I was offered, no matter how often I was placed second, no matter how carefully he arranged my exit from his life. He believed I would wait until he decided my future. He was wrong. I spoke softly. "You told me where I didn't belong." He said nothing. So I stopped pretending I did. Neither of us spoke again for nearly a minute. Finally, he whispered, "Where are you?" I looked out across the quiet lake. Somewhere peaceful. Then I ended the call. I wasn't ending our conversation. I'd already ended our marriage. People often ask whether Daniel and I ever got back together. The answer is no. Not because forgiveness was impossible, but because forgiveness and reconciliation are two completely different things. I eventually found room in my heart for the first. The second required trust, and trust is something that grows slowly but breaks all at once. The divorce took a little over 8 months. To Daniel's credit, once the initial shock wore off, he stopped trying to fight a battle he had already lost. Karen warned me that many spouses become vindictive after realizing they've lost control of the situation. Daniel didn't. Maybe Christmas night changed something in him. Or maybe, for the first time in a very long while, he was forced to sit alone with the consequences of his own decisions. During mediation, he surprised everyone. He admitted that he had been planning to file after Christmas. He admitted he had hidden that fact from me. He admitted he had misrepresented our marriage to his parents. He even admitted that telling Lily I was sick had been easier than explaining the truth. "I thought I was avoiding conflict," he said quietly during one session. Karen glanced toward me but said nothing. The mediator leaned forward. "And what do you think you were actually avoiding?" Daniel stared at the conference table for several seconds. "My own guilt." No one spoke. There wasn't anything left to add. The legal process became remarkably civil after that. We divided our assets fairly. The house was sold, and the proceeds were distributed according to the agreement. Neither of us tried to punish the other financially. Neither of us dragged the process out simply to create more pain. Ironically, the most peaceful part of our marriage turned out to be our divorce. A few weeks after everything became official, I received an unexpected phone call. Daniel's mother. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. "Hello?" Her voice sounded older somehow. "Treasured memories have a way of making people hear the truth too late," she said softly. "I owe you an apology." I didn't interrupt. I believed what Daniel told us because he was my son. Another pause. "I never once asked you if it was true." My eyes drifted toward the window of my apartment. Outside, early spring rain washed away the last patches of dirty snow. "I should have called you months earlier," she continued. "Maybe even years earlier." "I appreciate you saying that." "I don't expect forgiveness." "I know," she sighed. "I just wanted you to hear me say, you deserved a place at our table." The sentence landed harder than I expected. Not because it changed the past. Because it acknowledged it. "I wanted one," I admitted quietly. "I know." We spoke for nearly half an hour. Not about lawyers. Not about blame. About recipes. Christmas traditions. Lily. Ordinary things. By the end of the conversation, nothing had been magically repaired. But something had been healed. Months later, Daniel's father wrote me a handwritten letter. He wasn't a man who used many words. The note filled barely half a page. I failed to notice when kindness became invisible in my own home. "Thank you for the years you loved our family, even when we didn't always see it." I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the same navy blue folder that had once held my divorce paperwork. Some documents remind you how life falls apart. Others remind you that people can still choose decency after they fail. Not long after the divorce was finalized, Megan asked if we could meet for coffee. I almost declined. Instead, we met at a small cafe downtown. She arrived carrying 2 lattes. "I've been wanting to say something for months," she said. "I'm listening." She smiled sadly. "When Daniel told me about Christmas, I thought everyone had agreed." "I know. If I'd known the truth, she shook her head, I never would have walked into that house. I believe you. She looked relieved. Then she laughed quietly. You know something funny? What? You and I were never actually the problem. I smiled for the first time that morning. No. We were just two women trying to be reasonable while one man kept rewriting the story. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then we both laughed. Not because anything was amusing. Because the truth finally sounded simple. The person who surprised me most over the following year wasn't Daniel. It was Lily. Children see more than adults realize. She never asked inappropriate questions. She never chose sides. She simply continued being the bright, curious little girl who loved science, books, and looking at the stars. Every few months, she mailed me a postcard. Sometimes it was just a drawing of a planet. Sometimes a funny story from school. Sometimes only 3 words. Miss you lots. I always wrote back. Never criticizing her father. Never explaining the divorce. Children deserve honesty. They should never be asked to carry adult bitterness. The following December, almost exactly 1 year after that phone call, I found myself decorating another Christmas tree. This time, it stood inside my own apartment. Smaller than the old one. A little uneven. Perfect anyway. Over the previous year, I'd started a new position with a nonprofit organization that coordinated volunteer services for seniors living alone during the holidays. It began with one Christmas dinner. Then someone suggested inviting neighbors. A retired school teacher. A widower who had recently lost his wife. A young Army veteran whose family lived across the country. A nurse working the night shift who stopped by before heading to the hospital. By Christmas Eve, my apartment was filled with people who had started the evening as strangers. Someone burned the dinner rolls. Someone else forgot the cranberry sauce. The children argued over board games. People laughed too loudly. Someone started singing Christmas songs completely off-key. It was wonderfully imperfect. At one point, I stepped into the kitchen for a moment of quiet. Looking through the doorway, I watched everyone talking around the table. No one was checking whether they belonged. No one had earned a seat. They had simply been welcomed. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez. You coming back? She asked with a smile. I wouldn't miss it. As I returned to the dining room, I realized something that hadn't occurred to me all year. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't thinking about Daniel. I wasn't replaying Christmas. I wasn't wondering whether I'd made the right decision. I already knew I had. Because revenge had never truly been the goal. Dignity was. People sometimes mistake dignity for weakness because it doesn't shout. It doesn't slam doors. It doesn't seek applause. It quietly refuses to stay where love has become conditional. Several days after Christmas, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. There was no return address. Inside was a simple Christmas card. On the front, a watercolor painting of a snowy sky. Inside, in careful handwriting, were 8 words. Thank you for always making me feel like family. It was signed only, Love, Lily. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time holding that card. Then I smiled. Because in the end, the greatest victory wasn't watching Daniel lose the life he thought he controlled. It was discovering that I never needed anyone else's permission to build a better one. Family isn't the place that keeps a chair for you only when it's convenient. Family is the place where your presence is never treated like a problem to solve. And sometimes the strongest revenge isn't making someone regret losing you. It's creating a life so full of peace, purpose, and self-respect that you never again question your own worth. If my story stayed with you, I hope it reminds you of one simple truth. Never confuse being patient with accepting less than you deserve. Kindness should never require you to disappear, and love should never ask you to earn your place at the table. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to choose your self-respect over someone you loved? And if stories like this speak to you, please consider subscribing so